I'm happy to get started. So welcome once again to another edition of Landa Talks, number 26. This is one of the conversations I've probably savored the most with Laís de Oliveira, author of Hacking Communities. She's a mom, fractional, so she's been a founder. So lots to get deep into. So why don't we start, Laís? Maybe if you can introduce yourself a little bit to the crowd.
First and foremost, I appreciate, Gabrielle, you started with she's a mom. It's a very nice thing to hear. And that's quite defining of who I am. I have two children, and since they joined me, I became not just what I used to be, like a founder, community builder, but also someone who deeply cares about others in transition. So I have always been passionate about helping people become their fullest version, their best versions. And my story with community, how I landed in community and how I became a professional in community, was a story of actually becoming an entrepreneur and helping build entrepreneurial ecosystems all over the world, quite literally. And so I'm someone who really cares about personal development, and that of my own has been more recently becoming a mom and helping people now navigate transitions through community. So I'm a mom. I'm a thoughtful life transitions guide, for the lack of a better term. I'm not a coach, but I create experiences to help people navigate transitions, especially women and mothers. And I have always been an entrepreneur, even though it took me 25 years to figure that out. And yeah, let's take it from there.
Yeah, and obviously one of the facets that you currently have right now is also fractional. That's also very relevant to this conversation as well.
As
So
you said that,
started,
I need to add, I cringe at calling myself such a thing, but I'm a strategist. Sounds
yeah,
very like self-congratulatory to say it, but like ChatGPT and Claude said it. Let's put it that way. And after like thousands of conversations, but I'm someone who likes designing frameworks that are scalable. And the way I help clients now working as a fractional is really by like getting in the room and within a couple of conversations, figuring out, distilling what's signal from what's noise, and being able to figure out where to go, where to focus in a very strategic way. And I've done a lot of very diverse things to help me do that. But the best metaphor is that of like, you pay the plumber not because of like the actual task he's doing, but because of knowing where to hit the nail or whichever task. So it's like I became this very specialized generalist when it comes to community-led growth. And
yeah,
Jose asked about transitions. When I mentioned that, I'm more specifically talking about when people change their lives drastically and are suddenly trying to figure out who they are again. And that can be very poetic, like I became a mother, and I now want to incorporate that new way of being. My brain has been rewired completely. I want to incorporate that into my career. Or it could be a little bit more practical and drastic, like people who go unemployed. Right now, for instance, I'm a fractional consultant as head of go-to-market for Gig U. And a lot of my users, people who become gig economy drivers, are people who went through layoffs or went through massive life transitions or became a caregiver and can no longer belong in the workforce. So I help people pretty much build more care-friendly and flexible lifestyle through experiences that I design. Let me know if that answered your question.
for sure. And I guess I wanted to go back a little bit, Laís, as well, to I guess like your story getting your first client, right? Which is always a great one. So what pushed you to actually start, focusing from just being a founder, operator for communities to helping others? What was that story about? How did that happen? How did it start?
So I think there's two stories. The first is that actually I realized a while ago that my first client was back in Malaysia. I was living in Malaysia between 2014 and 2018. And I worked for the Malaysian government. And I had always been working for them as a consultant. So that started in 2014. And I worked part-time. My full-time job was Startup Grind. And I consulted part-time for the Malaysian government, helping them connect with local community builders, like grassroots community building, to spread culture, entrepreneurial culture. Then I joined, my boss at the Malaysian government referred me to someone who was building something called Culture Summit. It was a community of HR and ops people, heads of people, etc., who were trying to build organizational culture. And I helped Culture Summit build an elaborate global network of chapters, like a chapter strategy. That was 2020. And then I moved to San Francisco. I was working for Startup Genome back then and working fractionally as a consultant. Fun fact, of course, I did not have kids, so I could do that at the time. And but the first time I was intentional about the word fractional and figured that that was the way I wanted to move forward was when I became a mom. After becoming a mom, another very important thing to note, I had been working remote since 2014, 6 years before COVID, before many people were working remote. I hadn't seen an office in a long time, since 2013 specifically. And I was very used to working flexibly. And then when I became a mom, when I was pregnant, coincidentally, for some reason, it was 2021, and I was consulting for a client full-time in New York City who required me to go to the office every day. And that killed me. I was pregnant and I hadn't worked. So I figured out before having my kid that the usual way of working is not efficient and doesn't allow for care and for the pace that is needed when you become a parent or a caregiver of sorts. So not only I chose fractional because I like to work efficiently, but I also chose it because I find that's the best way to fit the current life I have. Maybe there will be a day in which I'm going to commit full-time again to another company, but for now, I figured being a fractional allows me to dedicate time to what I care the most. And I think I'm very efficient in the ways I work. And sometimes I find that I'm delivering as much as the people who are full-time and like in the office. And not to say that there's a lot of value in being at the office and chatting over the water cooler. But what I'm saying is that the way my life is now, I need to have time for my kids. And what I've learned from working with parents all over is that we become very efficient. So I think the matter of fractionality is efficiency, but also allowing time for the things that matter. And fun fact, I'm in the cute end of the fractional thing. Now, many of my clients, as I'm serving a community of gig workers at GigU, are in this least sexy end of that, which is like working with the apps and Uber screwing them up very much. Please don't quote me on that. But what I'm trying to say is like, I am very passionate about people who are trying to create new ways of working so that they can live lives that matter to them and take care of people who matter to them. And that's what the gig economy allows many people to do. And GigU specifically helps them actually win the game because the apps make it very hard for them to make money. So I'm very passionate about people living lives intentionally. And that's what fractional means to me.
Fully agree. And I guess one of the questions that always comes up, especially in this field, right? I feel like it's sometimes hard for founders to like see the ROI pretty clearly in community building. And you've definitely done your share of like pitching this, right? So I'm curious to hear like how you pitch this personally. And by the way, this affects me as well as a community builder, right? So I'm curious to hear what is your angle when you're talking to founders on why this makes sense for them as well.
So the fun fact is that I stopped trying to convince people. I usually attract the people who are already convinced. And I think that's the first step. I think in anything you're doing, if you think about, are you familiar with Eugene Schwartz's levels of awareness? For people who are not aware.
If you can expand, that would be great.
I'll just be very quick, but like there's 5 levels of market awareness. And it's like problem unaware, problem aware, and it goes up to like problem and solution aware. It goes from people who don't know they have a problem to people who know they have a problem and know a solution to people who know they have a problem, know a solution, and they know you, and they are already committed to you as a solution. I'm usually looking at levels 4 and 5, which is more aware. People who already are, because, and also another thing is that I narrowed myself down as a community builder. And the more I reinvent myself, which I tried to do completely, by the way, specifically last year, and I tried to ditch community building as a title completely, but I land back on the same spot, like the snake eating its tail. The way I operate is community building. So what I try to now answer your question more specifically. First is being good to attract the clients that you want, but also when I communicate what I do to my clients to close it, they come interested, great, but like to close it, sincerely, I talk very little about community. And in fact, I tend to, when they come to me, like the other day, a client that I decided not to take because of bandwidth, but very interesting, they were looking for help with community-led growth, because that's pretty much what I've been doing more focusedly. I landed in the idea of like leveraging an engine where community activates growth. And I actually would love to pitch that to you guys, so that maybe that's something that you can pitch to others. But I find that the ultimate outcome of community is growth, want it or not. It's people, it's word of mouth, it's people helping each other, it's your users growing and you growing. But I'll talk about that pitch later. But these guys came to me, and sincerely, my first reaction to them was like, I think you guys are barking at the wrong door. Like, I don't think this strategy is the best at all. Pretty much I was underselling the idea of community as a strategy for them, because I think my overarching focus is business growth and business development. The way I do it is through community. And I'm going to be the first one to tell you when community may not be a good idea for you. Because ultimately, I'm not someone who's just community. I'm someone who's thinking about business. I'm a founder. I've been an entrepreneur. I've helped business grow from 0 to 100 before. And I also am obsessed with leadership. So at the end of the day, it's about business growth and leadership development and building capacity in your team. And let me know if you have a follow-up questions. If not, I'm gonna.
No, I'm curious because you mentioned somebody you rejected. So I'm curious to hear like what are some actual red flags that you've seen, or what led you to reject that client? Like, what are some of the things that someone might say that you're like, they're actually not thinking about it strategically, it's probably not the right fit?
I think, to put it very short, when people have very, very ambitious results-driven growth for community-led growth, and they wanted to work for a limited number of hours, but performance-based for goals that would be achievable in the way they wanted, only through paid media. So when you have clients that think in a performance basis, but they want community just because they think it's going to be either cute or exponential or good for branding, or they really believe in it, but they want community to function in a very predictable way and put you to work within a framework that doesn't work for that. That being said, I did believe that client could reach those goals if I worked triple the number of hours they wanted me to work, but they wanted me to work for, let's say, 10 hours a week performance-based to give me a bonus that I'm not interested in. And the bottom line, I feel that you have to be a little bit, you can't be naive. You need to be very precise about the fact that if you are doing community-led growth, it's more like managing sometimes the environment, nurturing relationships. And it's a little bit like baking, right? When you're making sourdough, you can 1000% make very good sourdough every single time. But every single time, if you are a good baker, you know very well what you can control and the things you can't. Building community is about knowing everything you can control, knowing the things you can't, letting go of that part. But that being said, I just feel in a moment where I can choose and where I have so many important things to care about, I'm just very wise at advising. And I did advise that client that for what they wanted, if I were them, and for the lack of clarity they had also in terms of their ICP, which is also another issue, I suggested they went with paid media to learn first. But again, that's such a specific example. I don't know if it's helpful.
Yeah.
But does that make sense?
Makes sense. 100%. I actually wanted to transition to something that's very interesting and very relevant to this community, which is obviously when you start in the professional community space, the first thing that comes up is, how do I actually get my next client, right? Especially for fractionals, right? So I'm curious to hear your thought. And by the way, one of the findings that we got, and it was a research that was done last year, and it said 94% of leads from fractionals come from referrals. And you know this, I know this, but I'm curious to hear thoughts, like, generally speaking, in professional communities, how should opportunities actually flow within the network, right? So what's your what are your thoughts around it?
Well, I'm going to be practical first and share very openly that even many opportunities that I have today came from seeds that I sowed 5 years ago.
Yep.
So that's maybe hopeless if you're hearing this right now and you're starting a fractional business. So don't worry that you can totally get clients like within a month based on a hustle, like just on the hustle. But what I want to say is that when you're building yourself up, every single relationship matters. And the fun fact is that 2 of my clients that I've mentioned as my first clients came from former bosses.
Hmm.
My former bosses or my former clients. And then I kept building my network. And I had a moment of like, when I was very, very actively building networks and as a community builder, being out there connecting people for a moment in my life that was specifically between 2012 and 2000 and I want to say 22. I was very actively building communities, networking. I worked at On Deck, Startup Grind, Startup Genome, this Malaysian government initiative. I was hosting meetups. I was making up communities all the time. And then I got married and became pregnant. And sincerely, I went into a little bit of a cocoon because then I figured out I don't know who I am anymore. That's another story. But what I'm trying to say is that even the client, and then I wrote a book, right? And by the way, I did not write a book to sell my consulting practice. I wrote a book because I wanted to learn about writing a book. And I decided to choose the topic I knew the most about, which is community, to write that book. There were also other motivations. But what I'm saying is that like, I get a lot of inbound from very good relationships kept before. And more recently, I was going through a more like of a drought, sincerely, of opportunities. Like I was getting very, very good opportunities, but once in a quarter, versus before I would be getting like 10 good opportunities within a week. And I was like being overwhelmed and oftentimes not choosing well. But that said, that drought that I went through sometimes forced me into feeling like I had to go through some extreme methods to get referrals, like people who charge you 30%. And so far, what I've learned is that when I am working through those kind of referrals, it generally tends not to, for me, work out because I'm feeling that I'm being double taxed 30% by the government, 30% by my referral, and I don't feel motivated to pursue that. So I feel that referrals, the best way it works is when you get a referral from someone in a way that when you get a job, it's good for their human capital because it was their referral, and it's good for you. I tend to prefer referrals that come on a trusted basis, and 100% of my referrals came from people who trusted me before.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that answered exactly the question you had.
No, it does, and I fully trust that. At the end of the day, like I feel like the only relationship that actually works has to be win-win, right?
Yeah.
I think we both know this, and one thing that I want to focus on as well is because we're both community leaders, and I think we've also been on the experience on the other side, right? We're also community participants, and that's probably what led us to go into community building as well. And we both know that the best way to actually get is to first start giving, right? So I wanted to switch a little bit roles. As a community participant, I feel like if someone wants to become, I guess, like a trusted expert within the community or somebody that's like people look up to, what should they focus on the first year, let's call it? Like, what are some tips that you can give them?
Are they starting from scratch, from like being a tech executive?
They just went into a new community. What's the best way to actually start? I guess
Well, as I said,
the first 12 months. I'm curious.
when I mentioned that between 2012 and 2022, I was very active, I meant that I was having fun to start with, but I was giving way more. Like the thing is that it didn't feel like giving, and that's what matters. I was hosting events. I was introducing people. And to be honest, not in a selfish way, but I always felt very proud when I could make an introduction. If I was having a conversation with Pedro and he's mentioning something that came up to this day, like I'm just more focused and isolated today having a baby at home. But even if I'm having a conversation with Pedro today and I can give him knowledge, resources, or a connection that can help him or make his life easier, I'm totally going to do it. I'm going to go out of my way to help someone. And that's just the way I've been operating forever. And I don't even know why. Some people are like that. And I've learned this from good people too. It feels very good to be the one in the room actually actively helping someone else. So when I was living in Malaysia, I remember actually giving talks about this at the time, because part of the culture we had in Malaysia, which is very common in many, many emerging markets, was a culture of distrust. And I remember talking about it a lot to people about reverse engineering that. And that was part of my job with the government, in a way, to try to shift into a culture of more like openness and sharing and collaboration. But I remember telling people that whenever I met somebody new, and that was like peak community builder in Malaysia, Laís, I would be like obsessively listening to that person. I was very curious about people. And I remember being able to I had the like very good computational skills of connecting dots. So I was like, here, have a conversation with Carlos, and then immediately connect to something Pedro told me and said, I have to connect you guys. And the karma built from those interactions led to me joining most of the jobs I had in my entire life. I never really applied for a job. I did apply once. It was horrible. Don't recommend it. But seriously, it's crazy to think about this. And now I'm in a moment of life where I changed, and I'm trying to be more intentional about who I work for. I literally changed. So this is the first time of my life where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do outbound and pitching companies that I admire because I want to, not because I have to. That being said, Gigu, the company I'm currently working at, they approached me. The CEO wrote me because they read my book. But before that, it was someone who heard good things about me from someone I worked with on deck. I don't even know who referred me. So I think that helping others and having fun in that process is effectively building wealth, is investing. But I feel it can't be forced. It can't be something that you're doing expecting the exchange. So I introduced Pedro to Carlos, and I'm expecting now Carlos to do some good stuff for me. Doesn't work that way. You put into that network, and eventually you build yourself a very good reputation. It's almost like, forgive me, it's a very woo-woo word, but it's karma. And that comes back to you. So you need to do it recurrently as a habit. And I would sort of like put conversations on my schedule, have coffee with people, and be more focused on helping others than helping myself. And to be very vulnerable here, if you don't mind me going a little bit longer on this one, Gabriel.
Please.
To be very, very vulnerable, this is something I'm very open about, specifically with other women. I went through some of the hardest transitions of my life when I became a mom, and I freaking love my kids. I'm a very like mom, and I can't see myself in another way. But it was very wild for me to go from being a nomad entrepreneur into being in New Jersey as a married woman, living in a suburban house, and with 2 kids. It's very hard. What I'm going to say is that I went through this moment of like identity crisis, and I started a company called Nest and North to help me and help others going through that kind of stuff. And I'm still doing that, and that's been very meaningful for me. But there was a moment of my life in which I was in a bit of a dark place. And the fun fact is I found out that when I was in a dark place, I talked more about myself. I met people for coffee, and I was so eager to get help. And I figured that I deserve help because I helped so many people. But like, I figured that I was possibly eliminating opportunities of good things coming to me because I was talking so much and I was trying to sell myself so much. And it's so funny that we all go through those moments in life. And I'm not ashamed to admit this, because of major transitions, a layoff, whatever happened to you, where you're desperate because you do need a gig, you need a job, and you tend to just take over the conversation and talk more about you. And that's when you usually like miss out opportunities, contradictingly.
For sure. I couldn't agree more, by the way. And that's one of the learnings that we have, especially on the topic of lead generation. If you're talking, more than 30% of the call, you're probably missing out on opportunities. For sure.
Yeah. I am talking a lot here, by the way, but I think that's the idea. So,
that's the role you're taking.
Okay, sounds good.
Kind of being forced in many ways. Cool. Amazing. Laís, I actually want to switch a little bit to community architecture, which obviously is something you're deeply passionate about. And you also mentioned you're a frameworks person, which I totally do. And one of the reasons I want to get into is because obviously one of the ways, or I guess like the main objective of every community leader is eventually becoming a little bit more obsolete, right? So many of some of the folks here are actually like building their micro communities, right? So something I wanted to touch on was actually the 5 piece framework that you use in your book, right? So actually expanding on that, because I feel like, not a lot of folks here have actually gone into frameworks for community. It's not something that people like see a lot of theory on online. So I wanted to, hear your thoughts, if you can maybe expand on that concept as well.
You know what's funny? Because now that we're talking, I'm thinking that many of us, and I love how you said we're building our micro communities. You're talking about each of us are building our own brand, network, and community around ourselves, right? And our services. So if you don't mind, I'm actually going to start from a different framework because I think...
Take it however you want. Yes.
So I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person who used this metaphor before, but like, I usually like to think about us as a lighthouse, building a port, and then becoming a city or a township, whatever you will. So think about a lighthouse being when you become a beacon, a reference for certain topics. So whenever someone is, in my case, trying to figure out expansion, go-to-market growth through community, I want them to think about me. And it started with a broader lighthouse. When I was living in Malaysia, whenever people were talking about launching a new startup, landing in Malaysia, which is honestly the same thing. I'm going through a natural evolution on my first phase, but in the beginning, I was more like the startup girl in Asia, internationalization, but from west to east. And the bottom line is that the way I became a lighthouse then and now is by creating value. Back to our conversation initially. And writing my book, again, was not something I did for the fancies of it. It was because I figured I had knowledge to share and I wanted to learn about the process of writing a book. That said, many people write books strategically, and I super recommend that because it works out. My book is more like a grassroots thing I don't even talk about until people bring it out to me. So lighthouse, become a lighthouse, which means helping others, being top of mind, like build your own SEO, search engine optimization strategy. So the second you become, people start coming to you, you give them more reasons to come back. Maybe you give them a very insightful conversation. Maybe you connect them with someone else. Maybe you give them hey, let's have this conversation again. Let's chat. Then you become a port. You become a place people come back to. And people who come back to you either will keep having conversations with you because they're mutually aligned and positive, or they will hire you to have short conversations. Maybe they're going to hire you on $1,000 fractional. What's the name of that? My brain is like stalling right now. Retainer on a month for like have 4 conversations with you that month. Maybe you start on a very lightweight basis, but like you become a port. And then finally, your goal is to become a city, which is when the people around your community, they decide to stay. They become a long-term client. They hire you full-time if you are open to that kind of things, or they become part of your microverse where people within your universe not only are helping you, but helping each other, if that makes sense. So trying to apply this framework to your personal life is building excuses for recurring interactions within your network. And I think that content online is only one of the ways to do it. And in my opinion, it's not the strongest one. Having real conversations with people, hosting maybe roundtable activities, intentionally hosting people for conversations, I think is one of the most powerful ways to build that progression from lighthouse to becoming a port people often return to finally becoming a place where people decide to move into and become part of. That being said, do you have any questions or any follow-ups there, Gabriel?
Let's expand on the 5 P's as well, and then I have a follow-up for sure.
Okay. And then the 5 P's is just, again, for me, a way to help people memorize the core things that matter. But I think first and foremost is understanding your identity, which is a mix of who you want to attract into your circles. And that can be very practical or very philosophical, or both. And purpose. And purpose means more, it's so hard because when it comes to personal branding, it gets very deep very quickly. It's easier, to be honest, to talk about like Gigu or any other company, but or service provider. But as a person, I feel that purpose is more about like deep down, I want to attract people who are inherently willing to grow personally. And they do it through creating contexts around themselves, aka community. I want to attract people who are entrepreneurs. I want to attract people who are CEOs who believe in community. It comes back to your initial question about how do I pitch. The first step is establishing that I don't want to pitch. I want to attract the people who already believe what I believe. So this is defining your first two P's, which is a definer of identity. They are people and purpose. It gets very vague and abstract. So if you do want to know more about this, I'm open to having conversations one-on-one with people after that. Might take us time to find time, but the other two P's are more pragmatic. They are about connecting people. They are programming and platform. Once you know your people and you know the purpose why they gather, or why you want them to come to you, or why you want to connect them, you need the operational part of community, which is the bulk of the work. That's where the magic really happens, which is programming. You want to bring them together, what I mentioned about hosting conversations. That's key to the port building or city building, is like programming. And platform means literally like having a place for them to meet when there's nothing programmed. So programming is one of like, this is the program, right? You're bringing these people together here, we're meeting for the first time, I hope we stay in touch. The second thing is like platform, which is probably what you have, where like the equivalent for it in IRL like would be the library, the cafeteria, a place where people go when there's no specific event where they go. There's always going to be someone there, like a WhatsApp group, a Facebook group, whatever. So those are the ops connection part of the 4P. So people and purpose plus programming and platform equal growth. And growth is the fifth P, which is participation. It's not a community if you're the only one talking. So when people within your network start chatting with each other, start contributing, start taking in the load, if you're hosting an in-person event, that takes shaping like people who are your regular attendees. Again, attraction, engagement, and commitment. Like lighthouse, port, and city. First, people show up to your event just because they're curious. Then they keep coming back, port. Next time you know, they're helping you put the chairs back after the event. They're helping you carry the boxes. That's your goal. I even joked that every event should have a broken coffee machine because that gets people talking. If the coffee machines works, people just don't talk and they grab their coffee and they go to their corners. But that's a joke to say it becomes a community when users actively participate. And here is the core trick, which is also, it's applicable from individual to business communities. The way people contribute or participate needs to be directly in line with your value proposition. So I'm going to give a very concrete example. I built Nest and North. Nest and North is my most personal community possible because it was like for a very personal moment in my life, of life transitions that I built it, etc. What I want to help people with is arrive at clarity, to literally know where they're going in their lives. So to do so, I build a community and I hold programs. I held programs like journeys for people to go through and learn more about themselves and where they're going, where they were, where they went, etc. So when people in my community started helping each other by asking them smart questions about themselves, or suggesting books they could read, or connecting them to people who could help them in their next step, those people were helping me achieve my mission. So that's back to purpose. What I'm trying to say is that the way people participate needs to achieve your purpose, needs to help people. For example, if I'm a community for gig workers to make more money, which is Gigu, who I'm consulting for now, the way that they help gig workers help each other is like helping them learn the tricks and the best ways to work with Uber's, Lyft's algorithm to still make a living without working 12 hours a day.
For sure.
So it generally takes shaping knowledge sharing, but essentially you need to define what participation means, and that's the ultimate goal of any community. So it's Identity plus connection equals growth, and it translates to people, purpose, platform, programming, and participation.
Beautiful. That's so succinct as well. And by the way, I love that chapter as well. One thing that I would follow up on, just I want to get practical on this kind of audience, right? So I feel like just the average profile that comes into Landa obviously has an extensive capital of network. They have a lot of experience, obviously, and in many cases they tell me like, I already have 10,000 followers, right? In LinkedIn, social media, Instagram, whatever. I guess like, can you give me some practical steps for them to make this switch between just having an audience, very passive audience, to building a community, right? You mentioned an event, but I guess like in their steps, how would you start?
It highly depends on their goals. Some people are very happy with an audience, but if we're here, I suppose we care for a community. I feel people are very tired of just being an audience. And if anything has changed about the world, is that I read this somewhere. Everybody right now has the power, not only the power, the willingness, and maybe the pressure to be a creator. So I think that if community, as I just said, is about people participating and helping each other, the best thing you do is to set a stage where your people can be the protagonists and help each other. So your network is worth nothing if you're the only one talking. And I feel and I had to do this myself, like I had over 10,000 followers, which honestly means nothing these days. Many people have that. I'm sorry, like it doesn't, especially on LinkedIn. The best thing you do, though, in my experience, is to host that. But it's my experience, but I also want to say it's my choice, because I'm going for efficiency these days. I don't want to waste time with fluff. It matters more for me to have like one very good conversation a week than 10 random than 500 likes on a random post. So I would host more one-on-ones intentionally. I would host more, and I would be brave to do it. Like, why not just host a salon in person or virtual, where you invite people who care about a topic and you invite them to have a conversation? Or if you don't know who to invite, put out a conversation for like, hey, 6, maximum 12 participants to this discussion about X. Or survey your network. You don't need to literally survey them, but go through your network and find people who could be maybe good speakers and like interview somebody. Even if you are the expert about something, let's say Pedro is the expert in, I'm going to make this up right now, okay, Pedro, in marine biology. And he knows more than about glaciers and what than anybody else, but like he wants to spread his word to the world. So the best thing he can do is to interview maybe another peer of his who's developing in the research that he's curious about, and like have this live conversation and feature his peer. And by doing that, he's going to be showcasing his expertise. His expertise is undoubted. But like give other people space and give other people the stage. That being said, that takes a lot more of energy. And as I say it, I currently am not doing this, by the way, and to be very transparent, mostly because I am planning on doing even more like unscalable and local activities in my little local area, because once again, I'm going through a massive transition. My clients from community strategy right now are legacy and I love them, but what I'm building next is something new that even now don't know fully about. So to give you a sense of what I'm saying, I've been having coffee chats in person with people and partnering with local businesses towards building my next thing. And it's everything very slow, but I'm building a network and a real business that's going to be bud in the next 1 or 2 years by having 3 coffee chats a week and hosting quarterly events. But if that makes sense, I'm choosing density and relevance over quantity. Even if anything, I would just say this. I stopped paying for LinkedIn Premium since last May. It's been a year almost. I find LinkedIn relevant. I find a lot of noise. I find it irritating. The only thing I go back for right now is sometimes I go and post something like, hey, I'm going to South by Southwest. Who else is there? I get very low engagement because I'm not kissing the algorithm's ring. And I do like going once in a while to check in on my networks and see what they're doing and react to their posts. But as a broadcasting strategy, I personally have found it gave me no clients, even when I was at my peak of engagement.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to, that said, let me just take a step back. That's me. I know people who probably benefit a lot from high engagement, high quality content. That's just not who I am right now. And if you are in a moment where you're starting from scratch, I do not recommend you rely on LinkedIn. I recommend you rely on, go talk to people and make real conversations. And I hope I'm not like, that's not a blasphemy, but like, go find real communities.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned something. You throw in a benchmark that I feel like, when people are thinking about community building, that they need to have 40 chats a week, and the reality is you said 3, right? And that's very manageable for everybody. Our goal internally is to have 3 conversations per week, right?
So to give LinkedIn a little something good about LinkedIn is that recently a friend of mine who is a very, very, very renowned like community expert, Carrie Melissa Jones, she wrote a book as well. She posted something that I applauded, and I'm so glad to see people like her posting it. She said, you don't need 100 active members, you need 10. 10. You need 10 people on your network that are very good and very strong. And she's saying this, and she's built community for massive corporations, and she's talking about business communities. So I think within your own networks, you can think about Robin Dunbar's numbers. If you're not familiar with that, I wrote about it in my book in the last chapters, or you can just Google Robin Dunbar. Then he talks about social circles, and basically you have these numbers of like 5 people really close to you, 15 that are people you would invite for your birthday party, 50 that are your like, so there's like several layers of circles. And I took inspiration on that to talk about my closeness circles, which I'm sure you wanted to talk about as well. So take that idea of like, picture your own closeness circles. Who are your top 5? Professionally speaking, not personally. Maybe they include people that are like your wife, your husband, whatever, but like, who are your top 5? Who are your 15? Who are your top 50? And one thing that I want to share that I didn't, and is very relevant to this, is that I actually keep a spreadsheet, like a pipeline of my networks. I handpick every year 200 people, then I curate them down to 150, then I curate them down to 50, and I send them an email at the beginning of the year. Gabrielle always receives it, right, Gabrielle? And in that email, I send my life updates, and I asked for theirs, and I created a little framework for them to follow. So I find that that's almost honestly like cold approach, because some of the people I'm reaching out to, I haven't spoken with them in that entire year. I care about them, but just that's how life goes. And I usually preface with this. Sometimes I personalize my first line to some people and say, hey, I know we haven't spoken, but I care about you. I'd love to hear updates. And the fun fact is that like, I get a very good, like, I want to say I got maybe 25% response rate, which is like very high in my standards, but it's not 100%. There's people who only read the email and say nothing. There's people who reply with 1 sentence. And then there's people who reply with 3 pages of updates. So what I want to say is that I find curating my network, and I took that from LinkedIn the first time, and I updated every year of new people who came in, and I weed people who came like, who came out, who don't maybe mean the same thing to me every year. So I try to keep it very relevant to like 50 people, then 150, a broader update, and then I post that update on LinkedIn at the end of the day for like thousands of followers. So if that makes sense, thinking about your closeness circles, which is that's Robin Dunbar theory, will make you realize that usually all you need is to really nurture relationship. I don't want to say with like just 10, it's like 50 people. And that maybe means that you want to have 3 calls, or even if you have 1 meeting per year, there's 52 weeks in the year. If you met 1 person per year of those 50, I'm pretty sure at the end of the year, you would land somewhere really nice. It's better than shooting people on LinkedIn saying, hey, quick question to a stranger. And Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I feel like people overcomplicate it sometimes, and it's like, get an Excel spreadsheet up, do a list of people, reach out. And by the way, I stole that framework from Laís, by the way, and I'm doing it every year. Works great. I wanted to end this section, Laís, because we're a little bit over time, and I could speak about community building like forever.
Yeah.
But what role do you think communities will play in how professionals build careers over the next, let's call it, I don't want to say decade, let's say 5 years?
That's just asking for like an opinionated opinion, but that's a
This is
in a world of like, not to say the buzzword, but in a world where AI can do everything,
Mhm.
if you're not gonna be known by your relationships, I don't know what you're gonna be known for. If you're not gonna be memorable because of how you help people, or once again, I think there's very good natural language bots being developed right now, and even I talk to it, like brainstorm with my bot sometimes, and it's very decent. That being said, I was thinking as we were talking about this, we're still here talking, and I don't think AI needs input, and we are the input, and real life experiences are the input, and then real relationships. So I think as long as you're um, living and having experience and sharing them in person in real life, and this counts like as in person, you are gonna be making a dent in people's lives. You're gonna make yourself somehow memorable, maybe indispensable. So I feel building relationships is your moat in a world of AI. I'm gonna say it again. Building relationships is your moat in an AI world. So you gotta build yourself. You better have an edge, and I think relationships and community are that edge, and that capacity to structure and organize how you do it is something that you easily can access, and AI can coach you on how to do it. It stole everything from what we wrote, but it's doesn't matter. I think you should just apply it, and I should apply it and I want to say, not because I wrote a book about community, it's any easy. Community is a very, very hard daily practice of listening, putting out invitations, bringing people together, and always doing that, recycling it. And if you go through a career pivot or identity crisis, it's like you're starting from scratch again.
For sure.
And it's hard work that you got to keep doing daily. And I think for the way I've been growing as a fractional, it yields more high quality outputs in the long run than a paid media strategy in the long run.
I agree, and you just gave us the title of this episode. By the way, I love that quote. I wanted to end with just two quick questions.
Yeah.
I guess like more on the personal side. But first one is, what's one habit or practice that helps you stay connected today? Let's start with that one.
Stay connected to other people
or to yourself.
That's
one habit that you usually do that really helps you be you.
I think I'm gonna start actually by saying one thing that I want to improve at, because I actually really believe that whatever you have in your life where you want to improve, the things you want to get better at are actually your North Star. They are who you are in the future, who you are right now, but you gotta you kind of like have to work on it, I have a friend who founded a business called Relatable. His name is deepen. I highly recommend it, by the way. He's like a personal CRM. And he is the best person at replying emails that I've seen in my life. And I'm very bad at that. I can go with a message unreplied for ages, and that's very bad because I can blame it on having a baby and breastfeeding, but I should get better. Zvi replies with one single line, and that's it. But he does reply. So one thing that as an advice for all of us is be like Zvi, not like me, and reply immediately not immediately, but like reply within a day, even if it's short. And I think that's something very relevant these days that I really want to carry with me. And as a way to stay connected, I'm trying to say no to opportunities. I'm gonna say there's no other way to opportunities that come to me because of the network I've built, but not necessarily aligned with who I want to become. So I want to be better at replying. I need to, but I also want to be able to say no and reject opportunities that don't bring me to my next phase.
Yeah. And that's a good segue for the second one, which is what's next for Laís? Anything that you have mapped out that we should be looking out for?
Well, right now, again, I've mentioned the snake biting its own tail. I thought I would be steering away from the community strategy business world. What that actually meant was steering away from the LinkedIn world. But I care about community as an avenue for growth still, and I'm good at it, and I love doing it. And I am very obsessed about developing pretty much my new framework of how I operate, which is my pitch. I've mentioned in the beginning, for anyone who is willing to talk about it or steal it, it's very good, which I think is more like customer success as the engine for growth. And so community as an ops partner to product as a way to actually sell to CEOs that customer success is going to create more advocates in the bottom line. So building user journeys from a perspective of community to activate advocacy, but not from an advocacy incentives perspective, from a very core engine development perspective of like, help your customers be successful, then they won't stop talking about you, then nurture them, give them back, then give incentives and help them become your most like raving fans and advocates. So I'm very obsessed with that really, and I'm helping now GigU expand internationally. So I'm really narrowing down on like customer success and advocacy as a core strategy for expansion and growth.
Love it.
To market. Very passionate about it. If anybody likes that idea, I'd love to explore and talk about it more. In the more personal side, I have been slowly figuring out my way to creating better spaces, urban spaces, physical spaces, office spaces, restaurants for people to belong in with their kids when they become parents. I've been building local communities for parents who are also founders, entrepreneurs, and creatives in my local area. And I envision the outcome of it being either a physical space, or I'm going to rebuild my first business, 8 Spaces, which got acquired in 2017. But I'm going to build it this time as something for child-friendly, kids-friendly spaces, help the world become friendlier for parents. So, because if you are a parent, you know that the experience of parenthood is often isolating, more so when babies are babies and for women who are breastfeeding and things like this. But I believe for parents, for all parents. So we are kicked out of the places we used to belong to, except breweries, who are now kicking us out as well, because some kids and toddlers cause too much chaos and havoc. But anyway, so that's my next business. Maybe we'll see.
Beautiful. You're going to be competing with Adam Newman, I think, in some way. With Adam Newman, with his new company Flow.
Oh, that is that the thing? Oh, there you go. You know what? I have no clue what he's up to, and I better just stay. That's the kind of thing. I'm not paying attention to people.
Don't see him as a reference. I think nobody does at this point. But cool, Laís. That's everything I had. So just wanted to thank you. It was a little bit of a longer conversation on our end. I think I knew this was going to happen, but I really enjoy these conversations. Thanks for being here. I wanted to switch a little bit to